I thought I knew betrayal until I found that text message. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was plotting to steal my brewery with her investor lover. When she left for that business weekend in Denver, she had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. They thought I'd crumble, beg, negotiate. Instead, I changed the locks, emptied the accounts, and prepared for war. By the time she returned Sunday night, her key wouldn't work, and neither would her plan to destroy everything I'd built. Some men wait for closure. I chose revenge. My name is Zachary Whitaker, Zach to everyone except my mother and the IRS. I'm 37, owner of Northridge Brewing, a craft brewery I built from the ground up in Portland over the last 8 years. I met Tiffany at a beer festival when I was still brewing out of my garage. She was stunning, dark hair, green eyes that crinkled when she laughed, a marketing degree, and ambitions that matched my own. We were married within a year. That night in March, I was working late at the brewery. We had equipment issues with our bottling line, and our spring seasonal release was already behind schedule. My phone buzzed with Tiffany's text. Weekend business event in Denver. Leaving tomorrow. Back Sunday night. No discussion. No details. Just information, delivered like a weather report. Everything okay? I texted back. Need me to drive you to the airport? 20 minutes passed before her reply. All set. Already packed. Taking a car service. Love you. The love you felt tacked on, an afterthought. I didn't question it. I was elbow deep in machinery parts, and we'd fallen into this rhythm over the past few months. Ships passing in the night, each absorbed in our own worlds. Her event planning business had taken off, and between that and my brewery expansion, we barely saw each other. When I got home near midnight, Tiffany was asleep, or pretending to be. Her suitcase stood by the door, a sleek charcoal gray Samsonite I didn't recognize. New. Expensive. I noticed something else too. A shopping bag from Bella's Boutique, the high-end lingerie store downtown, tucked partially under the bed. I paused, hand hovering over the bag. We hadn't been intimate in weeks. Months, if I was being honest. Was this her way of trying to rekindle things? But something fell off. The suitcase was too perfect, like it was staged. The lingerie bag too visible, like bait in a trap. My gut tightened, the same instinct that had saved me from bad business deals in the past. I didn't peek in the bag. Instead, I showered and slipped into bed, watching Tiffany's steady breathing. Her back was to me, as it had been most nights lately. The distance between us measured only in inches, but it might as well have been miles. As I drifted off, my phone pinged with another text. Jake, my head brewer. Boss, that investor you wanted to meet? Winston Hopkins? He canceled his brewery tour for tomorrow. Said something came up. Denver trip. I stared at the ceiling, connecting dots I hadn't wanted to see. The morning Tiffany left, I drove to the brewery earlier than usual. Sleep had been fitful, my mind racing between denial and suspicion. As I pulled into the empty parking lot, the sun was just breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber, the same color as our signature IPA. I unlocked the heavy metal door and flipped on the lights. The familiar scent of hops and grain usually calmed me, but not today. I checked the tanks, more out of habit than necessity, then headed to my office. A small room with windows overlooking the production floor, walls covered with framed reviews and beer competition medals. Tangible proof of success in one part of my life, at least. My phone buzzed. A text from Jake, my assistant brewer, saying he'd be late. I didn't respond. Instead, I found myself doing something I'd never done before, pulling up our cellular account online. Tiffany and I shared a family plan, and I scrolled through the recent call logs. One number appeared repeatedly over the past few weeks. Late-night calls, some lasting over an hour. I didn't recognize it, but area code 303, Denver. The timing aligned perfectly with when Tiffany started working later, when she began pulling away. My chest tightened. I wasn't the type of man who snooped through his wife's phone. I'd always believed trust was fundamental, but now that trust felt like a bad investment. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. It rang 4 times before a male voice answered. Hello. He sounded confused, probably not expecting a call at 6:30 a.m. I hung up without speaking, heart hammering against my ribs. Then I did something else I'd never done. I checked Tiffany's Instagram. We weren't big social media people, but she used it for her event business. I scrolled through recent posts, stopping at one from 3 weeks ago. a corporate retreat she'd organized at a mountain resort. In the background of one photo, partially cropped out but still visible, stood a tall man in an expensive suit, his hand resting casually on the small of her back. I zoomed in, and though the image was grainy, I could make out his face. The same face from the website of Hopkins Investments. Winston Hopkins, the investor who'd suddenly canceled his brewery tour, who was now, coincidentally, in Denver. My phone pinged with a notification. An email from an address I didn't recognize. w.hopkins@capital.com. Subject: regarding your wife. The message was brief. Zach, awkward situation. Tiffany mentioned you two had an understanding about separate arrangements. If that's not the case man to man, we should talk. Currently with her in Denver. No bad intentions here. Understanding? Separate arrangements? The words blurred as a rush of blood pounded in my ears. Attached was a photo. Tiffany in the hotel lobby, wearing a dress I'd never seen, leaning into this Winston with a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the desk. Outside my office, I could hear Josh arriving, the sounds of the brewery coming to life. Normal sounds, but nothing was normal anymore. I picked up the phone again and typed a response with steady hands. No understanding. No arrangement. But thank for the clarity. Then I turned off my phone, pulled the bottle of bourbon I kept for special occasions from my desk drawer, and poured myself a double. The first decision of many I would make that day, none of which would be waiting around for her return. I didn't confront Tiffany immediately. That's not my style. In business, I'd learned that information is power, and I needed more before making my next move. After that first bourbon, I locked my office door and switched to water. I needed a clear head. Jake knocked a couple times, but I waved him off through the window. Handle production today, I mouthed, pointing to the floor. He nodded. My staff knew their jobs. Winston Hopkins was easy to research. 42, divorced twice, CEO of a mid-sized investment firm specializing in food and beverage startups. He'd been featured in Denver Business Monthly last fall, the same issue where they'd interviewed Tiffany about planning their annual gala. The connection was obvious now. What wasn't clear was how long this had been going on. I pulled up our joint bank statements. Over the past 4 months, Tiffany had made 6 purchases at high-end hotels, all listed as business expenses. Not the Four Seasons chain we normally use for business trips, but boutique hotels with romantic weekend packages. 2 in Denver, 1 in Seattle, 3 here in Portland, all when I've been at beer festivals or brewery expansion meetings. My hands clenched into fists, knuckles white. I forced them open. Emotional outbursts wouldn't solve anything. I needed strategy. I checked the Denver Four Seasons booking. A suite reserved for 3 nights under Hopkins' corporate account. I called the hotel, put on my most professional voice. This is Zachary Whitaker, confirming delivery arrangements for Winston Hopkins. I paused. My wife, Tiffany, should be arriving with him. Can you let me know if they've checked in yet? Yes, Mr. Whitaker. Mr. Hopkins and guest checked in approximately 1 hour ago, sir. And the champagne I arranged was delivered to the room as requested, sir, along with the roses. I thanked him and hung up. So much for her business event. She hadn't even created a separate reservation under her name. No attempt to hide their arrangements. I leaned back in my chair, surprisingly calm. The pain would come later, I knew. For now, there was clarity in understanding just how complete her betrayal was. I texted my lawyer, Michael. We've been friends since college, before I had $1 to my name. Need to talk. Privately. Today. His response came instantly. My house. 3 p.m. Sarah's out of town. I glanced at my watch. Time to start moving chess pieces. Tiffany had made her play. Now I'd make mine. Michael's expression remained professionally neutral as I laid out everything I'd found. We sat in his home office, untouched beers on the desk between us. She's been skimming from the business accounts too, I said, sliding over printouts. Small amounts, but it adds up. $20,000 over the past year, funneled through her event planning LLC. Michael reviewed the documents, frowning. This helps. Oregon's no fault, but financial misconduct can influence division of assets. He looked up. You're sure about this? Once we file, there's no going back. I nodded. The brewery's about to expand into 3 new states. Valuation will double within a year. She knows it. That's why Hopkins is sniffing around. He's not just sleeping with my wife. He's mining her for investment information. Have you confronted her yet? Michael asked. Not until I'm ready. Not until everything's secure. Back home, I went straight to our bedroom. Behind a mirror in Tiffany's closet was our wall safe, installed when the brewery first became profitable. Inside, passports, birth certificates, insurance policies, and the original brewery ownership documents. I spun the combination, hearing each tumbler click into place. The same combination we'd used for years, our anniversary date. The safe swung open. Empty. Not completely empty. My passport remained, along with some cash. But all the critical documents, including the brewery formation papers with both our signatures, were gone. So was Tiffany's grandmother's jewelry, which she'd claimed was in a safety deposit box. I've been right about Hopkins. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated move. While I'd been busy building us a future, Tiffany had been planning her exit strategy, with my business as potential collateral damage. I called our bank. As I suspected, Tiffany had visited our safe deposit box yesterday, before leaving. The clerk couldn't tell me what she'd removed, only that she'd spent nearly 20 minutes inside the vault. I stared at the empty safe, a strange calm settling over me. I hadn't expected this level of calculation, this degree of betrayal from the woman I'd built a life with. But in a way, it simplified things. No gray areas. No second chances. I texted Michael again. She took documents. Escalate timeline. Then I made another call to our brewery security firm. By nightfall, all codes would be changed, all access points secured. Tiffany's credentials would open no doors. Let her come back Sunday to a life already transformed. Sunday evening arrived with storm clouds building on the horizon, fitting weather for what was coming. I'd spent the day methodically preparing. The brewery was secured. Bank accounts protected. Lawyer briefed. Now I waited in the kitchen, a glass of our award-winning stout in hand, listening for the sound of her car in the driveway. At 7:42 p.m., headlights swept across the windows. Car door. Footsteps on the porch. Keys jingling. I took a slow sip of my beer. Tiffany entered, rolling her suitcase behind her. She froze when she saw me, sitting there in the dimly lit kitchen. Zach, you startled me. She composed herself quickly, smiling that practiced smile that once made my heart race. Why are you sitting in the dark? I didn't answer immediately, just studied her face. Designer sunglasses pushed back on her head. Lipstick slightly smudged. New necklace gleaming at her throat. A thin gold chain with a small diamond pendant. Not my gift. How was Denver? I finally asked, voice steady. Exhausting. She moved toward the refrigerator, keeping her back to me. The client was demanding. Wanted to change everything last minute. You know how it goes. Which client was that again? She faltered for just a moment. Bennett Group. The technology conference. I nodded, took another sip. Interesting. Because I called your office on Friday. Megan said you didn't have any events scheduled this weekend. Tiffany turned slowly, her expression hardening. You checked up on me? I did. Also checked our accounts. The safe. The brewery documents. I set my glass down. Winston Hopkins sends his regards, by the way. Her face drained of color, but she recovered quickly, shifting to offense. You had no right to go through my things or check up on me. That's controlling and... Stop. My voice wasn't raised, but it cut through her words like a blade. You're in the Four Seasons with another man while embezzling from our business. And I'm controlling? That's quite a spin, even for an event planner. She crossed her arms. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The only question is how long you've been planning this. Taking documents, building a case against me for when you leave with half my brewery. Our brewery, she snapped. I helped build that business. By planning launch parties. While I worked 18-hour days for 8 years. I stood up, towering over her. You could drop the act, Tiffany. Hopkins already confirmed everything. Something shifted in her eyes. Calculation replacing defensiveness. She stepped toward me, softening her posture. Zach, listen. It was just a fling. It meant nothing. We can work through this. I laughed, genuinely amused by her pivot. You left for a weekend to explore yourself, Tiffany. You thought I'd just wait around, but I've already moved on, without looking back. What does that mean? Her voice sharpened. It means I filed for divorce. The locks at the brewery are changed. Your company credit cards are canceled. And those documents you took. Copies, all of them. The originals are with my lawyer. Her facade cracked entirely. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. This is simply the consequence of your choices. I picked up my beer again. There's a hotel room reserved for you at the Marriott. 2 weeks paid. After that, you're on your own. This is my house too, she hissed. Actually, it's not. Check the deed. The house is in my name only. Your idea, if you recall. Something about protecting your assets. I picked up my glass again. You have 1 hour to pack essentials. Anything else, we'll arrange through the lawyers. The look she gave me could have curdled milk. You'll regret this, Zach. When I'm done, you'll have nothing. I simply shrugged. I built something from nothing once. I can do it again. But you? You'll never find another man to bankroll your lifestyle like I did. The truth hit harder than any insult could have. The week after Tiffany left felt like emerging from a dark tunnel. I threw myself into work, finalizing our distribution expansion, overseeing a new limited batch, and meeting with potential investors, properly vetted ones this time. Wednesday afternoon, I was reviewing production schedules when Megan, Tiffany's assistant from her event planning business, appeared at the brewery. Petite, perpetually nervous, and fiercely loyal to Tiffany, or so I'd thought. Mr. Whitaker, can I speak with you? Privately. Curious, I led her in my office. She clutched a manila folder like it contained state secrets. Tiffany fired me yesterday, she blurted as soon as the door closed. Said the business was downsizing. But then I overheard her on the phone with Mr. Hopkins, talking about liquidating assets and moving to Denver. She thrust the folder toward me. I thought you should have these. Inside were printouts of emails between Tiffany and Hopkins dating back over a year. Strategy discussions about approaching me for investment. Plans to leverage my brewery's success for Hopkins' portfolio. Tiffany's suggestions for how to extract maximum value from the Northridge brand. Cold, calculated business discussions interspersed with intimate personal messages. The complete intertwining of the professional betrayal and the personal one. There's more, Megan said, not meeting my eyes. She's been inflating invoices for your brewery events, skimming the difference. I helped set up the accounting. Her voice cracked. I didn't know what it was for. She said it was a surprise retirement fund for both of you. I sat heavily in my chair. Why are you showing me this, Megan? You've worked for Tiffany for years. She straightened her shoulders. My dad owned a small hardware store. When my mom left, she took half of everything. He never recovered. Her eyes finally met mine. What she's doing isn't right. The brewery employs 30 people. My brother works in your packaging department. I nodded slowly, understanding. This wasn't just about loyalty or choosing sides. It was about protecting livelihoods, including her own. Does she know you have these documents? No. She thinks I erased everything when I cleared out my desk. Megan fidgeted with her sleeve. There's one more thing. She's meeting with your distributor tomorrow, trying to convince them to delay signing the expansion contract until after the divorce settlement. My jaw tightened. Tiffany knew our distribution deal was the linchpin of our growth strategy. Delaying it would tank our projections, lower the brewery's valuation before asset division. Thank you, Megan. This changes things. I reached for my phone. Would you be willing to make a statement to my lawyer? She nodded firmly. Yes. And I saved backups of everything. As I dialed Michael's number, I felt something I hadn't experienced since finding that first text message. Hope. Tiffany had underestimated the community I'd built around the brewery. She thought I was isolated, vulnerable. She was about to learn otherwise. By Thursday morning, Michael had filed an emergency motion to freeze all business assets and accounts based on Megan's evidence. The hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m., conveniently coinciding with Tiffany's planned meeting with our distributor. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early, dressed in my best suit, the one I usually reserve for investor meetings. Michael met me on the steps, briefcase in hand. Ready? He asked. More than ready. Inside, we were directed to Courtroom C. I was scanning the room when I spotted him, Winston Hopkins, seated in the back row, checking his watch nervously. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, suddenly fascinated by his phone. That's him, I murmured to Michael. Hopkins. Michael nodded. Interesting. He's not required to be here. Either he's supporting Tiffany or he's worried about his own interests. A bailiff called the court to order. Judge Harmon entered, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes. Tiffany and her attorney hurried in just as proceedings began, looking flustered. She'd clearly come straight from what should have been her distributor meeting. The color drained from her face when she saw me. Then her eyes darted to the back of the room, spotting Hopkins. Her expression hardened. Michael presented our case methodically. Financial records, email printouts, Megan's sworn affidavit. He highlighted the pattern of embezzlement and the clear intent to sabotage the brewery's upcoming deals. Your Honor, we're not simply asking to freeze assets during divorce proceedings. We're requesting immediate injunctive relief to prevent irreparable harm to a business that employs 30 people and supports our local economy. Tiffany's lawyer attempted to paint this as a vindictive husband's overreaction, but Judge Harmon wasn't buying it. Mrs. Whitaker, she interrupted, these financial discrepancies are concerning. Can you explain the diverted funds and your communications with Mr. Hopkins regarding company assets? Tiffany glanced back at Hopkins, who was already standing, edging toward the exit. My business partner and I were exploring investment opportunities, Your Honor, without your husband's knowledge, while transferring funds from company accounts. The judge's tone was ice cold. The gavel came down 15 minutes later. Assets frozen. Temporary restraining order preventing Tiffany from accessing brewery property or contacting our business partners. Emergency conservatorship of the brewery granted exclusively to me until final divorce proceedings. In the hallway afterward, Tiffany cornered me, fury in her eyes. You orchestrated this whole thing. You knew about my meeting today. I simply nodded. I learned from you, Tiffany. Always be one step ahead. This isn't over, she hissed. Actually, it is. I gestured toward the courthouse entrance, where Hopkins was speaking with his own lawyer, pointedly avoiding looking our way. Your boyfriend's already moving to protect his interests. I wonder how long he'll stick around now that your access to the brewery is cut off. Something flashed across her face. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. For what it's worth, I said, I actually did love you. Remember that when he abandons you too. 1 month after the hearing, I was working late at the brewery, finalizing our new distribution agreement. The expansion was back on track, production up 20%. The long hours were paying off. Jake knocked on my office door, looking uncomfortable. Boss, there's someone here to see you. I glanced at my watch. Nearly 10 p.m. Who? Winston Hopkins. My head snapped up. Here. Now. Jake nodded. Says it's important. Business proposal. The audacity was almost admirable. Send him in. Hopkins entered cautiously, dressed impeccably as always, though the confident swagger I'd seen in photos was notably absent. He looked like a man who'd miscalculated badly. Whitaker, thanks for seeing me. I didn't stand, didn't offer my hand. What do you want, Hopkins? He sat uninvited, straightening his tie. I want to invest in Northridge Brewing. Officially. Above board. I laughed out loud. You're joking. I'm not. He leaned forward. Look, the situation with Tiffany, that's over. Bad judgment on my part. Bad judgment. I repeated the word slowly. That's what you call sleeping with my wife while plotting to steal my business. He winced. I deserve that. But I'm here on legitimate business. Your expansion plan is solid. The market positioning is perfect. I want in, straight investment, minority share. No management control. I studied him. This man who'd nearly destroyed everything I'd built. Why would I ever agree to that? Because I'm offering $3 million. And because I can bring distribution contacts in 6 additional states. He slid a folder across my desk. Full proposal. All transparent. I didn't touch it. Where's Tiffany now? His expression flickered. We parted ways last week. Creative differences. Creative differences, I echoed. Interesting euphemism, for she's no longer useful without access to my brewery. Hopkins had the decency to look embarrassed. The investment offer stands, regardless of personal history. I finally picked up the folder, but only to hand it back to him. No, you haven't even looked at the terms. I don't need to. I stood up, towering over him. 3 months ago, I built breweries and trusted people. Now I just build breweries. He started to protest, but I cut him off. Here's a counteroffer. You stay away from me, my business, and what's left of my personal life, and I don't send Megan's complete file to the SEC for investigation into your investment practices. The blood drained from his face. What file? The one documenting how you manipulated company valuations through personal relationships over the past 5 years. Tiffany wasn't your first. Creative partnership. He stood abruptly. You're bluffing. Maybe. I smiled coolly. Sure you want to find out? After Hopkins left, Jake poked his head in. Everything okay, boss? Perfect. I gather my jacket. Let's get a beer. I'm buying. Outside, the night air was crisp with possibility. For the first time since this all began, I felt truly free. Not just of Tiffany, but of the anger I'd been carrying. I'd faced down the man who tried to take everything and sent him running with his tail between his legs. The brewery was secure. My future was mine again, and that was worth celebrating. 6 months after the courthouse showdown, Northridge Brewing's expansion was complete. Our new tasting room gleamed with polished wood and copper fixtures, triple the size of the original space. Local press milled about, sampling our limited edition anniversary stout, taking photos for features in Portland Monthly and the Oregonian. I adjusted my tie, surveying the crowd of loyal customers, business partners, and brewery staff who had stood by me through everything. Jake approached, grinning, 2 beer flights in hand. Boss, the mayor just arrived. Says he wants to meet the man revitalizing Portland's craft scene. I accepted one of the flights, sampling our newest creation. Perfect balance. You nailed the dry hopping. Jake beamed at the praise. Couldn't have done it without the new equipment. The German fermenters were worth every penny. The expansion had stretched our finances, but advance orders were already exceeding projections. The risk had paid off. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Divorce finalized. Papers signed. Congratulations, you're a free man. A weight I'd been carrying for months finally lifted. The legal battle had been messy after the initial hearing. Tiffany fighting for every penny until the evidence against her became overwhelming. The final settlement left her with less than she would have received had she simply divorced me honestly. Everything okay? Jake asked, noticing my expression. Better than okay. I replied, tucking my phone away. Let's welcome the mayor. As I crossed the room, I spotted a familiar face near the entrance, Megan, Tiffany's former assistant, chatting with our new marketing director. She'd been instrumental in documenting Tiffany's financial schemes, testifying despite pressure to stay silent. I'd hired her 3 months ago to manage our events and corporate partnerships. Best decision I'd made in years. She caught my eye and raised her glass in a subtle toast. I nodded in acknowledgement of all she'd done. The mayor launched into his speech about local business success stories, using Northridge as his prime example. Cameras flashed as we cut the ribbon on the new facility. My staff cheered, these people who had become more family than employees. Later, as the crowd thinned, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The evening air was crisp with early autumn, stars appearing in the darkening sky. My brewery stood solid behind me, its windows glowing with warm light, the future I'd built despite everything thrown against me. In that moment, I felt something I'd almost forgotten, genuine contentment. Not happiness exactly. That would come later. But the solid satisfaction of a man who had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. I'd lost a wife, but saved my life's work. More importantly, I'd rediscover my own resilience. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. 1 year after Tiffany's departure, I sat at a corner table in Riverside Cafe, reviewing expansion plans for our second location. Northridge had exceeded all growth projections, earning Regional Brewery of the Year from the Pacific Northwest Brewers Association. The bell above the door chimed. I glanced up out of habit, then froze. Tiffany stood in the entrance, scanning the room. She'd lost weight, her designer clothes replaced by something more subdued. When her eyes met mine, she hesitated before approaching. Zach, I heard you might be here. I gestured to the chair across from me. No point in being rude. Tiffany, this is unexpected. She sat, hands fidgeting with her purse strap. I'm moving to Seattle next week. Thought I should say goodbye properly. Seattle. I kept my tone neutral, professional. Fresh start. Small event planning firm, offer me a position. She attempted a smile. Not quite the career trajectory I planned, but it's something. I nodded, waiting. She hadn't sought me out, just to share her employment update. I saw the article in Beer Advocate, she continued. The expansion, the awards. You did it, just like you always said you would. We did, I corrected. The team made it happen. Her eyes drifted to the table. I've had a lot of time to think about what I threw away. She looked up. I'm sorry, Zach. Not just for the affair, but for trying to take the brewery. For betraying everything we built. The apology sounded genuine, possibly the first honest word she'd spoken to me in years. But it changed nothing. "I appreciate that," I said simply. "I hope Seattle works out for you." She seemed to be waiting for more. Absolution, perhaps, or an opening to the past. When none came, she nodded slowly. "Hopkins is under investigation, by the way. SEC. Thought you might want to know." I heard. I didn't mention that the investigation had started with an anonymous tip containing Megan's carefully compiled evidence. Silence stretched between us, filled with the ghosts of what once was and what might have been. Finally, she stood. "Goodbye, Zach. I really do wish you well." I watched her walk away, feeling neither anger nor regret, just the calm certainty that this chapter was truly closing. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Meeting with distributors confirmed for 3 p.m. Also, Sarah from the coffee shop asked if you're free for dinner Friday." I smiled, typing back, "Tell Sarah yes." Outside the window, Portland's familiar rain had stopped, sunlight breaking through clouds. Perfect brewing weather. Perfect weather for new beginnings. The man I was a year ago, blindsided and betrayed, would hardly recognize me now. Not because I'd changed fundamentally, but because I'd finally become the version of myself I was always meant to be. Stronger, wiser, and finally ready to trust again. Not in the past, but in the future I was creating one decision, one day, one brew at a time.